get started here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wait a minute. There is absolutely some sort of sound coming from somewhere. I hear it. There it is. Yeah, how about we just close that? Freaking ads, man. In any case, this is Cracking the Shell, the show where I analyze Legacy of the Void content for all of your entertainment. Today we will be cracking the shell into the competitive viability of Roach Hydra Lurker. Both its, well, not both, but its uses, how to execute it, certain build orders, though we won't focus too much on build orders as those aren't necessarily as important. We'll also, in the second portion of the weekly episode, be covering how you can counter this strategy as both races. Well, both other races, and probably a little Zerg section too. In any case, let's get started here. Roach Hydra Lurker. Yeah, it's an interesting strategy. The thing about Roach Hydra Lurker is that it's essentially the Lurker replaces what the Swarm Host was supposed to do and be a sort of buffer for the Roaches and the Hydras to make sure that how do I say this? Like, to make sure that the Roaches and Hydras don't trade super fucking poorly against things like siege tanks, and it's essentially a zoning tool, a siege tool. And the problem with the Swarm Hosts was that they were so strong that they ended up being an entire army on their own. And that was not entirely favorable, so they were nerfed, changed, rebalanced, and the Lurker took its place rightfully. And it's the place the Lurker's filled since Brood War. I didn't play a whole lot of Brood War, but Lurkers saw a lot of use against Protoss in particular. You would go Lings in the early game, and then into Hydralisks, and then Lurkers after that to help defend your bases and also certain points on the map. I know they got used a lot against Bio-Terrans as well, not quite so much against Mech Terrans if I'm not mistaken, because Siege Tanks have like the longest range in the galaxy, but you know, it's no big deal. And in Legacy of the Void, they fill a similar role. They're mainly used against Terran players as well as Protoss in pretty much all fronts. And they're very, very good right now. I won't get into balance because that's not what this show is about. Let me write out this frame drop here. Oh god, no, not 200 frames, please. It was going so well. I don't understand. Let me open up my Damn, son. I might have to restart my computer. Might. That would be very, very sad if I have to, though. I don't think I'll have to. I think I should be fine here. So I'm really sorry about that. I've been having a few problems with my internet lately and trying to get it worked out, and it's really frustrating. In any case, Roach Hydra Lurker. Lurkers are mainly used as a zoning tool because as a Protoss or a Terran, it's incredibly hard to engage into Lurkers, right? They do an absolute shit ton of damage. They have a very, very long range, and they're very, very tanky, so they're extremely hard to kill as well. And essentially, the general strategy of the Zerg player going into Roach Hydra is to obtain map control, and that's something that Zerg players had a little bit of trouble with in Heart of the Storm. Sure, there's things like creep and spine crawlers, and if you got your like giant swarm hosts wall up pre-patch, then yeah, you had a bunch of map control. But outside of that, it's very difficult to contain a Terran player or a Protoss player in the mid game. Roaches and Hydras don't trade super well against Marine Marauder. They don't trade well against things like Colossus, or even like Sentry Stalker. And oh lord, we just dropped a couple more. I'm sorry. I really apologize. What was I saying? Oh yeah. And things like Lings could only contain or like contribute so much to map control, considering they were so fragile and could be picked off. There hasn't really been a unit other than the Swarm Host, which was probably the worst designed unit in StarCraft, followed closely by the Warhound. It's I don't know. It's just you need like some sort of space control siege tank unit, and that's the role that the Lurker fills right now. Generally, you're going to be opening hatch first, into pool, into like 3 hatchery, then you go into like a roach type thing to help transition. But the build orders aren't super important. That's not what I'm looking at today. Today I'm going to be mainly focusing on the what should I call it? The strategy, the positioning, that sort of stuff. So we're going to hop into a replay real quick. This one was submitted by a good buddy of mine over at SCV Rush. Oh lord, where's my iCloud window? There we go. Now, this is a pretty long replay, so we're not going to watch the entire thing, but I just wanted to point out some key things about Roach Hydra Lurker in this replay. Also, very important. Oh lord, I can't believe I've done this. There we go. That's the right overlay. So this is an Archon mode game. It's a meching Terran against a semi-standard Roach Hydra Lurker force in our Zerg side of things. They go pool first, and then obviously extractor trick into hatchery. That's very, very standard. They're gonna have a few links to try and punish this sort of greedy play, but in the end, again, everything's standard here. This isn't the important part of the game, so I'm just gonna kind of fast forward through it. It's all fairly mundane stuff. Third hatchery goes down. All sorts of cool stuff. Let me scoot this over here. Whip, whop. There we go. Lots of gas going down for our Zerg player, as is standard for the matchup. Ugh, god, when do these Lurkers get out, man? Well, I guess it's not Lurkers necessarily that I'm looking for. I actually decided to go Spire first here, which is not bad. It's alright. Terran goes for a hidden base. Again, not necessarily important. We're looking more at the Zerg player here. Zerg player is far more important. He decides to go Mutalisks and kind of gets wrecked by Liberators, but then he transitions, or they transition into a slightly better composition later. I think they went Mutas to counter the Cyclones, which is a pro tip for y'all. They're pretty good against Cyclones. Liberators not so much though. I don't know. Did they actually? Oh wow, they didn't even spot that base. Man, that's pretty sad. Oh lord, can you make some Lurkers, please? I don't want to look like a fool here for too long. The Lurker den does go down now. Lots of upgrades and stuff on the way, Roaches and Hydras. And you want to get, of course, like a lot of Roaches first, because you need something to buffer for and honestly, like, these Mutalisks weren't too bad of an idea. It's unfortunate that they got shut down so hard by the Liberators. But the thing about it is, like, you need something to buffer until you get to Lurkers. You can't just, like, sit there on 3 bases with no units and expect to be able to get Lurkers up for free, as long as players are playing very aggressively. And he's got a couple of Lurkers out, and just look what he does with them right now. He doesn't have a whole lot of units on the field, so he just places them in these nice little cute choke points right here. Like, what is going to be able to get through here without immediately dying? Hellions, wrecked. Cyclones, wrecked. Marines, Marauders, wrecked. Nothing is getting through that because these 2 lurkers are here zoning things out. And this is the good map control. This is exactly the way a siege tank works. You put a siege tank in an area and somebody is no longer able to necessarily go in that direction. They're going to have to commit a lot more to it than they maybe wanted to. And this is such a big thing for Zerg players, is they didn't necessarily have this before. And just watch how he takes these sorts of engagements. Runs the roaches forward, keeps the lurkers semi in the middle of the cluster, and then burrows them when necessary. Again, creating these sorts of walls and stuff. These sorts of, like, if you look at this, okay, yeah, the Terran player doesn't have a whole lot of, like, actual stuff right now. But let's assume he's going like a standard mech composition rather than air mech, and he's got a bunch of Hellbats and siege tanks and Thors and stuff like that. And they try and walk down this ramp into this area. Immediately, they all take 60 damage splash. Well, the siege tanks and the Thors do at the very least. The Hellbats take 40 damage splash between the 2. And we have all of these roaches in the backfield with 2 more lurkers, as well as all of this creep spread. And lurkers can pick up and run away relatively quickly. They're one of the faster ground units in the game. Like, this sort of map control is generally unprecedented. This is something we do not see in Heart of the Swarm. Oh lord, overlays. Overlays are hard, guys. Generally, in Heart of the Swarm, what we see is we see good creep spread, and then roaches and hydras are sort of scooting around the Terran army. Like, you got this giant mech ball here, and then you just see the roaches and hydras scoot just out of range of the siege tanks, try and get anything done that they can. Because you can't engage that sort of army, you can't contain that sort of army, because the moment he decides he wants to move out, you kind of have to back up, because you can't trade with siege tanks that are leapfrogging forward. In addition, oh lord, I just completely lost my train of thought. Alright, I am really like ditzy today. I can't handle this. Oh yeah, it was the like life we see doing this a lot. He does those like really sick Ling run-bys where he'll just sort of he'll find any crack in the Terran players, like walls or any sort of defense that they have, and just run 30 Lings through. And that's what he does. He can't take a direct engagement, and he can't maintain enough map control against these strategies, so he just runs by and tries to do as much economic damage as possible, so that when he finally does take the engagement, it's a worthwhile engagement to take, and it's something that he can actually trade well against if microed properly and all that good stuff. Ugh, yeah, I can't talk today. This is fantastic. So we're going to scoot back into the replay. Again, this is fairly long and really, really like scrappy, but there's a lot more examples of this very good lurker positioning, the very good roach positioning, and a lot of just like engagements being won or lost depending on how the lurkers are positioned, how they're engaged into, and all this sort of good stuff. So let us continue. Play the replay. Play it. So, continuing forward, we just have our Zerg player massing up, getting a bunch of bases, lots of economy going on. Whoa, I was hitting the minus button. Not what I meant to be doing. But, again, like, no ground-based units can move forward into this area because of the lockdown that's going on here. Sure, there's quite a few air units that, but those can't actually hit ground in this composition. We see the Liberators trying to zone out the Lurkers. That sort of cool little shenanigans there. I like this play. I really like the way Liberators work. I don't necessarily like the unit, but I like the way it works. So we just see like zoning battles going on, and this is very, very reminiscent of Brood War. Brood War was a lot of zoning battles, especially in things like PvT, where it was siege tanks versus dragoons, and it was so much based on just where you put your units. And we see like he's got this giant wall of lurkers here, and this is what's giving him the map control, right? These lurkers right here are allowing him to be this forward on the map. If he ever gets into a bad spot against this sort of composition, these siege tanks and Hellbats right here, if he ever gets into a bad situation with these units, he just backs up, scoots into the lurkers, and he immediately gets a favorable trade. Now, we do see things added on, like the Vipers adding in a very nice counter to the Sky Toss strategy. We see lots of good upgrades, a ton of bases being taken all over the map. We even see Lurkers defending the bases, which is excellent, excellent, excellent. But really, all that's just gravy. All you really need is this sort of large Roach Hydra clump that you can run around, deal damage, deny expos, do all sorts of cute little play with this giant ball of Roach Hydra, and then you need that solid backbone. You need the big anchor to the whole game. You need these Lurkers in a good position out on the map, doing something in terms of maintaining map control, maintaining a good position, and it is the backbone of the Zerg army, where the Zerg player can always revert back to, okay, I'm just going to sit back on these Lurkers. He's not going to be able to move forward into me. If he does, he's not going to trade too well with it. This giant ball of Roach Hydra can go around sniping these expos once he finds them. They can be denying mining time here, even if he positions well in this little area right here before the siege tanks and hellbats get into position. And hey, if the hellbats and siege tanks come here, he moves his Lurkers forward, gains a nice position right in this little choke point here. And that's a nice little engageable spot where you can move roaches in here, roaches in here, and roaches in here. And if he tries to engage, Lurkers are there, zoning him out, gaining a lot of map position. Now, this is an Archon mode game, so the macro of both players is obviously far superior to that of a single player. Things like the creep spread are a lot better off because there's two players managing it, but it's still the same concept whether you have immaculate creep spread or not. You're still zoning, and you still have these like walls of units. Like, yeah, sure, he can sort of move into this area and start trading with these Lurkers, but he can always just pull these back. These are very fast units, on creep especially, and you can have that still same backbone to his army. This isn't something that was possible in Heart of the Swarm without something like the, what's it called? The Swarm Host pre-patch. And still, he's got this giant ball. He's still got the backbone Lurkers at home just in case somebody tries to run by or whatever. He's still got that backbone. He's got a couple of Lurkers with his army right here, providing again another form of stability out on the map. He can continue to do these sorts of moves out on the map, these like little pressures and all this cute sort of stuff, all because he has these Lurkers to provide some sort of good trading against the mech army. I believe pretty soon we should be seeing the first major engagement of Roach Hydra against the mech army. Of course, creep cleaning up is going to happen. That's a sad thing, but as long as you maintain it consistently and keep like spreading your creep out more and more, you'll be able to keep up on it. And look at this. He can just fall back to this position with all of these Lurkers. Like, he takes a bad engagement. Well, he takes a really good engagement here. The Blinding Clouds were amazing. Vipers are really good in this sort of composition, especially against mech, because they kind of invalidate siege tanks to an extent. But if that engagement had gone poorly, what does he do? He's in the middle of the map or right here. He throws down a wall of Blinding Clouds right here, so the Thors aren't quite as eager to move forward. Then he scoots his units back right along here, right into the Lurkers. And what does a ball of Thors and Hellbats do against 9 Lurkers? Well, okay, that's 8 Lurkers. I'm sorry, I can't count. What does a ball of Thor and Hellbats do against 8 Lurkers with a bunch of Roaches and Hydras on top of them? There is no engaging into that. There's simply too much DPS between all of these, and that's the solid backbone that Zerg needs. This is what allows them to play so aggressively on the map. I don't know. Do I want to? I'm gonna go off on a tangent here for a second. I'm gonna go off on a tangent. The Lurker is so well designed. It's so well designed. That map control, that sort of like being able to just sort of sit in a spot on the map is so vital. That was something that Zerg needed so much in Heart of the Swarm. And we saw it with things like the Stalker Sentry composition, where the Zerg player can't really move out onto the map that much. They don't have that backbone area anywhere except for home, because that's where your spines are, that's where your good chokes are generally, that's where your queens are, that sort of good defensive thing. And we saw it again in the PVT or the ZVT Ling Bling Muta against Biomine. The Terran player just sort of rallied all of his units across the map into the Zerg player's base, and yeah, there could be like little expeditions out onto the map, but once the Terran player got serious about pushing, you needed to fall back because you needed a good place for your Banes to engage, for your Zerglings to engage, so that you could get the proper connections and a good choke point, and the Terran player couldn't split as well. With the Lurker, you have that sort of backbone good positioning, but you can move it somewhere else, right? Like, you don't need a wall of spine crawlers in your main base anymore. You don't need it at your third base or whatever. You can sort of have 4 to 6 lurkers sitting out on the map in a good like line spread, and you always have somewhere to fall back on, and that's so good. That's so vital. I think lurkers are going to be an essential part of most strategies from now on. Like, I feel like they're just so good right now. Not even based on damage, just based on what they give the Zerg player. It's not even necessarily a like a numerical edge. Like, it's not like he's just going to walk all of his units on top of like 8 lurkers and just lose them all. It's the mental advantage, right? Like, he sees 8 lurkers in a line and he says to himself, I can't engage that, right? He says, I can't engage that, and that means that you can sort of go forward and you can scoot around and you can do all sorts of cute little things with your roaches and your hydras and your lings and all that sort of good stuff. And you still have something to fall back on. You still have that mental edge of, okay, if he goes on, like, if he sets his ball of units on top of these lurkers, I can't engage that. And that's such a good, like, mental advantage to have over your opponent. I want to scoot into, like, the rest of this game. Like, again, this game is 33 minutes long real time, so I don't want to go through the whole thing, but essentially what this game came down to is exactly what I said. He moves out on the maps with his roaches and hydras and stuff like that, and he harasses bases. He does lots of economic damage. He tries to keep the army size to a minimum of his opponent, while always having these lurkers to fall back on just in case. There were a lot of small engagements, a lot of things like that I talked about, where you try and trade as efficiently as possible and then just fall back when you need to. Adding on Vipers, of course, is very strong against Mech. Maybe not so much against Bio, but definitely versus Mech you want to be adding on Vipers. Vipers are very good. But yeah, this game just boils down to that. I don't think I want to continue going on with that because it's a pretty mundane replay. I heard from the guys that played it that it was extremely fun game, but yeah, I'm gonna scoot into a game on Echo that I played where I got absolutely annihilated by very good lurker play. So we'll be scooting into that in just a moment. Lurkers fill a slightly similar but also slightly different role in PvZ rather than PvT. In PvT, you're finding anchors so that you can go and do harass damage, whereas in PvZ, what you're trying to do with your lurkers is sort of pincer your opponent so that you can force them back and give them no map control at all. You're trying to contain your opponent, and that's the main purpose of this. So we're going to scoot forward in this replay. It's myself versus Kess. I played this fellow on ladder when I was trying out my Stargate builds and all that sort of good stuff. See this man going hatch first here. Hatch first being extremely good in Legacy of the Void because of the new economy changes. You get it so much faster. Gas first into pool. Very good if you're transitioning into tech later on. All that sort of good stuff. I myself am going a fairly weird build. It's gate into Forge, as I mentioned last week, but I go immediately into Stargate which is relatively unimportant here. I'll be talking about that in the second portion of the episode, where I mention how you counter these sorts of styles. Here we see something that you need to be doing early game if you plan on going lurkers. You need to get units on the map. And this is so important, because if you just let your opponent sort of do whatever they want and get whatever sort of units they want on the map, the problem you're going to run into is that when you try and take map control with your lurkers and you try and contain your opponent, you're going to find that he's already too far out on the map for you to properly contain him. Sure, you can hold it home with lurkers, but it's going to take a lot more effort to get out on the map and to push him back out of the map than it is to properly, just get a few lings, get a few roaches, pressure them, keep them in their base. It doesn't matter if they take a third so much. Like, don't invest so much in denying the third that you're risking losing the game if you don't have to. Like, if you can and that's an option, just go for it. But if you're not sure it's going to work, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But what you can do is you can do like this player right here, Kess just did. You can get 10 lings out on the map. You can get 10 roaches out on the map for relatively cheap. And then you scoot across the map, you pressure him, you keep him from harassing you, you sit there on your 2-3 bases, and you make him sit there on his 2-3 bases, and you just keep the pressure up. As long as you keep the pressure up, you'll be able to get good map control, be able to get a good economy going, and a lot of lurkers rolling. And it's not a huge commitment, really not. As long as you're not committing so much to that aggression out on the map, then you're going to be not only ahead of your opponent in terms of army tech and also economy, you're also going to be ahead in map position. And that's the real important part in PvZ. Map position is so important in this matchup. Anyway, we'll continue on here. Lots of lings. He hasn't necessarily shown that all these lings are here, but if 9 speedlings walk into this as I'm trying to move out on the map, I'm not going to be able to do anything, which is very, very good. Adding on more roaches and stuff too, he can sort of scoot up the ramp, scout what's here, gauge that sort of thing. He's actually able to get in here, which is kind of nice for him, but not able to make a whole lot of stuff out of that. I accidentally selected my sentry, or my mothership core on top of my sentries here. And that's why I let him through on accident. But either way, that doesn't matter. We're looking at the Zerg player here. Comes forward with a bunch of roaches. Again, pressuring, keeping me on my bases. Always scared that he's going to do these sorts of run-bys. Brings a lot of roaches in. Pressures my third base. Able to pick off a handful of units. I think he got like 1 sentry there. Not huge wins and not a whole lot of trades, but look at this. I'm still sitting back on my 3 bases. Generally, what you want to be doing as Protoss is you want to be making use of these 2 oracles that you got with like a phoenix, or excuse me, not a phoenix, an oracle opening. You want to be making use of this. You want to be getting good map control with the stasis wards, and these are the anchors for the Protoss player. Yes, these are. Envision the stasis ward like a lurker, right? The stasis ward is the backbone of the Protoss aggression, because if you don't have stasis wards, you don't really have anything to fall back onto if something goes poorly. This is the lurker of the Protoss army, but if you keep him back at home and he's not even able to move his army out to that backbone, you're gonna have a bad time, right? Because like you can't. You're always going to be under siege by a bunch of lings, a bunch of roaches, and you're just never going to be able to get the map control you need. Continuing forward, I take a bunch of losses because I'm a scrub. I'm able to pull it back though because the cannon finished up, and also I brought my oracles back. But because he was able to trade so well with my units, and even if he hadn't been, he still would have had like a ton of lings, a ton of roaches, and he just would have pulled back and been completely fine there. He's already starting up a lot of lurkers here, and he's going to be able to get that fatty map control like I talked about earlier. He's going to be able to move his Roach Hydra ball forward, start pressuring my third base, start pressuring my natural, and still have that giant wall of DPS and scary damage to fall back on once he's able to start moving out. Adds on a lot of lings and all that sort of good stuff. What the fuck was that? Did you guys just see that shit? What? No, we're going back. We're going back. Going back for days. Okay, let me watch this on normal speed. Y'all see what just happened there? Those rocks fell and then immediately despawned. That's a pretty sick bug. Check this. They fall and they're gone. What? Alright, that's a pretty sick bug there. That's a pretty sick bug. Anyway, continuing forward. That has nothing to do with this. Still pretty cool though. I'll have to put that in the bug report forums later. Somebody remind me of that. Where's the like Reddit remind bot? Oh, that stasis ward made me so happy. I wasn't able to convert anything off of it, but it still felt good. And here we see, like, I have no map control. As the Protoss player, with this style, with this kind of unit composition, this like gateway immortal composition, you need to be moving out on the map and you need to be pressuring the Zerg because you can't let them get the economy that they want up. But with this amount of lurkers here, what is this, 8 lurkers? Yeah, I can't push up this ramp at all. If I try and move up this way, my whole army gets annihilated. If I try and push up this way, I have the stasis ward backbone, but if he places his lurkers right about here, I still can't really push through that. And because I know he's got a ton of links here that are coming off of stasis relatively soon, I don't want to do that anyway, because then he runs the lurkers, or the links in here, traps me behind the lurker, or next to the lurkers, and then I just sort of lose my whole army again. This backbone prevents me from moving out, and rather than being like a positional, like I'm going to sit in the middle of the map, like right here backbone, that it would be in PvT, it's rather a pincer hold where it strangles me. It's like a python, right? Like I can't move past like this low ground area of the map right here. I can't move past this because if I do, I'm going to get wrecked by lurkers, and that's how these work. That's what you need to be doing in this matchup. If you like, Zerg players need to be positioning their lurkers, and they have been, and this is so good. They position their lurkers in a way where the Protoss player can't get anything done. And if you can't contest the economy of the Zerg player, especially with the new economy changes now, and you can't possibly engage because of the contain, you're just going to have a bad time, right? You're just going to have a bad time. And these sorts of contains are so strong, and they're so good, and it's very hard for the Protoss player to break them. It's extremely hard. Once you get that good ball of Roach Hydra on top of the lurkers, there's not really any trading with that. You're just going to keep leapfrogging forward your lurkers while moving forward your Roach Hydra ball, and there's only so far the Protoss can run backwards. There's only so much map they can escape to. In any case, now that I've outlined the general purpose of what you want to be doing with lurkers in this matchup, we're going to go on a short break, and I'm going to get a glass of water because, oh my lord, my throat's like actually dying. And then we're going to be moving into how you counter this sort of style, as both of the other races, as well as probably Zerg too. I don't really know, like, Zerg, it just turns into Roach Hydra Lurker versus Roach Hydra Lurker, which is just a positioning battle, so it's not a big deal anyway. But I'm also going to introduce next week's episode and all of that sort of good stuff. So I will see you guys in the next segment. Thank you for tuning in, and I will be back in 1 or 2 minutes, depending. Break screen.